and welcome to the Modern Alchemist channel. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this is The Map, the Modern Alchemist podcast. Today we will be giving the front cover of the Economist magazine a thorough going over. I first became aware of the cover on December 5th, 2016, thanks to one of my viewers who asked if I would please speak to its meaning. In this area, I feel uniquely qualified and am happy to oblige. I've been reading the tarot as a course in the study of the Kabbalah and as a means of developing what some within the field of the esoteric call psychism for over a decade. Professionally, I have read the tarot for the last 4 years in the South Puget Sound region and can still be found offering my services as a tarot consultant every Sunday at Earth Magic in downtown Olympia from noon to 3. Longer if there's a greater demand for my services that day. As we proceed in the analysis, you will discover that my method and technique are perhaps a bit different from the norm found online or in your average New Age shop. This is largely due to the level of my education and the broad spectrum of my personal interests. So with that said, let's begin the analysis. Methodology. The reading as presented on the cover of The Economist is presented in the style of the Rider-Waite deck as drawn by Pamela Coleman Smith, but with some very significant stylistic differences, which to the untrained observer may seem meaningless, but to the trained observer, like myself, can mean a great deal. The layout appears to be a standard 8-card layout, but this is a deception. The deception is revealed in the Judgment card depicting Trump sitting on a flag and the globe. We'll be discussing this card in greater detail, but the truth of the matter is that this is a fusion of 2 cards, the Emperor and Judgment. We'll get back to this later, but for now, it's important to realize that we are looking at 9, not 8 cards. My first impression upon gazing at the cover displayed on my laptop screen was a sense of deep nausea. Frankly, the nausea still affects me every time I consider the implication of seeing a tarot spread on a magazine cover like that of The Economist. Furthermore, without knowing a thing about what you are gazing upon, you can sense the dread within the imagery. But to the trained observer, you get a sense of a big fuck you. Why? Within the tarot, there are 2 ranks of cards, the major arcana, or trump cards, and the minor arcana. Only trump cards are present within this reading. Get it? Trump cards. And there's the first big fuck you to the rest of us, with many more to follow. Why is this significant? Because when cast in the context of a reading, and the context is this, The Economist magazine is facilitating the role of the one laying down the cards, the tarot consultant, and we are the ones for whom the reading is being done. This is the first context in which the reading is given, and so all interpretations of this reading will be relative to economic and political effects associated with the Trump administration over the course of 2017. Of course, with The Economist magazine serving as the tarot consultant, the one who lays down the cards, we are the querent, or the one who comes with a question. In this case, the question is, what will 2017 hold for all of us, not just America, but the world? To receive an answer given exclusively in trumps is to tell the querent that whatever events may unfold, they are completely out of the querent's or our control. Trump cards set the stage for everything else that will happen. They present a forceful hand in the future that can only be dealt with, perhaps overcome, but certainly whatever events unfold are now outside the control of the querent. Again, the big fuck you to the rest of us. The die is set, the future is cast, get ready for the ride. The next thing to observe is the relative position and condition of each card. Since no cards are reversed, we can assume one of 2 things. One, that the cards selected were simply not ones reversed within the deck, very unlikely. The probability of drawing 8 upright trump cards out of a 22-card pool is pretty unlikely. One would expect that at least one card to be reversed in the selection. Or that no cards are reversed in this deck and that it is to be read Crawley style, as in the Thoth deck, wherein the cards in the deck are seen as dignified or ill-dignified relative to the cards to which they are adjacent. To be dignified in a reading means that the card now carries increased intensity, as brought by its immediate neighbors. To be ill-dignified means basically the opposite, and the meaning or effect of the card is diminished or reduced. Because we do not see any minor arcana in the reading, we are unable to draw any direct elemental correspondence which would help us to rate a card as dignified or ill-dignified. This leaves us with rating the cards based on a chronological presentation, meaning this leads to that, which leads to the next thing. Or associative presentation, because this card is next to that card, its meaning is now this. After having given the spread some considerable thought, I believe we are looking at a hybrid of an associative presentation where relationships between each card, physical relationships as well as in physical proximity to the card, is the best way in which to interpret this spread. Finally, I elected to run through a list of common tarot spreads, which would then enable us to properly read this spread as it is, keeping in mind that we are looking at 9, not 8 cards. I settled on a 9-card spread, which is designated to give a projection from a singular point, both forwards and backwards 6 months from the event, plus an additional examination of events extending beyond 6 months, both forward and backward. What is required next is merely to plug and chug, or place the cards in order in their respective spots. Because we live in the first world, I elected to read the cards as I would a text in a newspaper or magazine left to right. This makes the Tower card number 1 and the Star card number 8. The 9th card is the Emperor card, which is also on the number 2 spot. So, with all this foundation, let's begin. Analysis. Card 1, your or our current situation, the Tower, card number 16. Right off the bat, we begin with some rather subtle symbolic references. In the traditional depiction, we have 2 persons, one with a crown, one without, falling to their doom, with the crown being dislodged from the top of the tower by a big W-shaped lightning bolt. The W is a reminder of Saturnian influence or power, and all that comes with it in its modern interpretation, which is usually death or destruction. In this card, the tower appears to be splitting in 2 or unzipping, revealing a new tower underneath, suggesting that the more things change, the more they shall remain the same, as that the substance of the new tower structure is drawn from the foundations of the old. On either side of the tower are 2 groups of people who are divided ideologically and spiritually, and are presented as communism and Christianity, which are historically mutually exclusive. The idea of 2 towers becoming one seemed reminiscent of 9/11, another subtext within the reading when in consideration of Trump's campaign promise to reopen investigations into 9/11, where 2 towers fell and one was built in its place. The tower has a cross above its main door and a billet nailed to the door. I believe that this is a historical reference to Martin Luther's posting of his 95 Thesis in 1517. Oh, and no, the tower is number 16, and so 15, 16, 17. Ha ha ha, very clever. This would also seem to be an indication of our entering into a new age of spiritualism to replace the failed ideologies and cosmologies of communism and Christianity. The impact of this transition will be seen as being just as significant as was seen during the Protestant Reformation, resulting in a complete overhaul of prevailing dogma, paradigms, and ideologies. At this time, it would be well to take note of a prevailing theme within all of the cards depicting the ground, the exception being the star. That the ground looks liquid, as if it were in constant motion, preventing any kind of stability or security. This is how the ground is seen here in the Tower card, and also the Hermit and Death cards respectively, in constant motion with no hope of stability. Further investigation into the card reveals 10 flames extending from the top of the tower. The number 10 becomes a recurring theme here, and I believe it points to the start of an actual hot point in the reading, which will be in October of 2017, emerging as a result of the lightning strike that looks, in fact, very much like the Shazam symbol worn by DC's Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel is a hero who channels the powers of the old gods to become superhuman. Is this a possible reference to a new spiritualism emerging from more ancient sciences and beliefs? I think so. Why? Because the path leading to the tower mirrors the bolt of lightning at the top of the tower. Finally, in what seems to be a very strange coincidence, in a recent viewing of Terminator Genisys on Hulu, it's an okay movie, I noticed that the new Terminator Judgment Day had moved forward to October of 2017. Coincidence? Let's look a bit further. You decide. Card number 2. Recent past, less than 6 months. Keep in mind, this reading begins on January 1st, 2017. The card is Judgment, Emperor, cards 20 and 6. Before we begin discussion on this card as a fusion of two cards, let's address its impact as the card of Judgment, wherein Trump is depicted in the posture of Emperor. Traditionally, this card is associated with a kind of final judgment before the coming of a savior figure, complete with heavy Christian overtones. Casting Trump in this light lends credence to the idea that Trump is now being cast as a kind of new Ronald Reagan, who will make Americans proud to be American again. This also speaks to the fact that the people have used their judgment, poor or otherwise, in the selection of Trump as their president. Finally, it suggests that the selection of Trump invites a judgment upon the people, and certainly brings with it a kind of warning that how we act over the course of the next several months as individuals will be reflected upon the whole, for good or ill, whether we have done anything or not. We shall become guilty by association as Americans. In other words, we as a people may be held responsible for the decisions of our leaders, because it was we, the people, who placed those leaders into power. Now, let's discuss this card as a fusion of two cards. Judgment and the Emperor, which is the actual face of the card being shown over the word judgment. Trump is seated upon the American flag, which to me looks like a poop emoji, and it provides itself as a cue for a play on words, making Trump a turd world or third world dictator as Emperor of America. Trump's feet are dangling down over the United States. However, the most noticeable thing is the fact that the card is slightly tilted to the objective right. This places this card in physical contact with number 1, number 3, and number 6, each of these numbers holding Saturnian reference, referring to the astrotheological planet Saturn. 1 and 3 combined render 13, which is a reference to Saturn via association to the human fertility cycle and the god Osiris, which is the southern hemisphere male aspect of Saturn, being impotent. 6 is a reference to Saturn's orbital number from the Sun. All these numbers added together give us another number 10, which surrounds Trump as Emperor. The orientation of this card also places Trump, and by extension the United States, just out of harm's way relative to what appears to be a significant war or destruction abroad, as seen in the Death card in position number 5. But it is the connection to Emperor Trump and the Magician card that is the most revealing, for it shows that no matter what you may think or what you think you see or may think may be happening, something entirely different is taking place right before your eyes, like a magic trick. We'll discuss this further when we get to the Magician. The next thing to note is the position and placement of the globus cruciger, Latin for cross-bearing orb, which is the Christian symbol of authority, and the scepter, which is considered a component of royal regalia. Traditionally, the emperor carries the globus cruciger in the left hand and the scepter in the right. In traditional presentation, under the pillars of the Kabbalah, this would place religious authority under the pillar of mercy, ruled by the sun in proxy, and royal secular authority under the pillar of severity, ruled by Saturnian. This shift in position means a complete shift in the way things will be done in the future, and is yet another signal that what we have left that we have left the age of Pisces and entered into the age of Aquarius, which is in traditional astrology relative to the precession of the equinox, would be ruled by Saturn. In other words, look out, Christians, because times are changing more rapidly than you can possibly imagine, and those Christians who voted for Trump may well think that they voted for the proverbial Antichrist by the end of 2017. When considering the flag, the blue of the flag is over the United States, while the red and white are spread across the world behind Trump. This is an indication that Trump will oversee a great deal of social unrest domestically, while enjoying extraordinary commercial and cultural, spreading the ideals of what it is to be American, success or influence abroad. When I first saw this message, I thought of Trump's acceptance speech, where the only truly substantive policy action he stated was in relation to rebuilding America's infrastructure, a promise he will appear to keep in card number 6, which is a look into the near future less than 6 months out. So, economic growth is to be expected in the second quarter of 2017, specifically in housing and development and also infrastructure like roads, rails, and bridges. Trump will be seen in history as the new Ronald Reagan. He will oversee extraordinary domestic spending coupled with massive industrial and commercial deregulation. This will have the impact of stimulating the economy but driving the deficit into orbit. A final note about Trump's feet. His left feet, which represents the pillar of mercy, is over the American Midwest. This is likely to be an area given a great deal of economic support by Trump by way of corporate incentives and subsidies. His right foot, the pillar of severity, appears to be over the North Dakota area and may be an indication that while tensions may have eased, there may be more in store for the future once Trump is sworn into office and his debt to big oil comes due. It may appear that it is over now, but it's not over yet, not by a long shot. Card 3. The distant past, greater than 6 months. The world, or card 21. This card should make any conspiracy theorist or analyst go into momentary apoplexy. Why? Because it quite literally depicts the 3 seats of hidden government ruling the world and what they control, and they do it so openly. The 3 seats of government are found in Rome, depicted by the pyramid, which is the religious arm, London, depicted by the temple seen head-on with the triangle emphasized, which is the financial arm, and Washington, D.C., depicted by a temple on a raised platform seen at an angle, which is the military arm. Above the 3 structures are presented the world as we know it, filled with art, science, and literature, but all cast under the light of a golden sun, a clear sign of Luciferian, perhaps Illuminati, principles, ideals, or ethos. What is depicted is all that has led us to this point, and it is being shown as something that exists outside the domain or control of the world at large, regular people like you and me, because these structures dominate the landscape, define it, and are untouched by it. This card is our reality check to inform us that we are being governed, and not strictly by ourselves, our choices, or our interests, but by something hidden and outside the reach of secular or spiritual authority, because they are the authority. This card also informs us that Trump is an employee of these greater world powers by virtue of the fact that it may be seen as grabbing the heel of the lower right side of the Emperor Judgment card. Even though he is POTUS or Emperor, his influence will be in name only because he will send our armies where he is instructed to do so. In this case, wherever those interested in maintaining the strength of the petrodollar are concerned. Trump will do well in this position because being a CEO of a corporation is something Trump is familiar with. In the case of his current position as POTUS, he is CEO of the corporate empire of the United States, Capitis Diminuto Maxima. Finally, this card gives us insight as to why England really left the European Union, Under the EU Charter, they would no longer be able to manage global financial concerns as they had in the past. This is not a tenable position for the financial interests of those in control, and would disrupt the triumvirate of power currently depicted on the card by destabilizing the petrodollar. Card number 4. How the past is affecting your current situation. The Hermit. Card number 9. This card is dramatically different from the original version of the card as drawn by Pamela Coleman Smith. In her rendition, it is merely a man standing atop a tall peak or precipice, gazing down in solitude. Now we get to see upon what he has been gazing. Here we have what seems to be a continuation of the presentation of the tower in the first card, the image of the tower being reflected in the tower precipice upon which the hermit is standing. Beneath the tower precipice is a globe that is cracked, broken, the crack resembling the lightning strike of the tower card, the strike descending to what appears to be Washington, D.C. at its end. The fluid terrain of the tower has moved the people together, and together they march forward in protest of all that is happening, but to no avail. Remember, these are the trump cards, and the die is cast. The pattern is already set. Now all that can be done is to weather the tide as it comes in and pray for high ground like that upon which the hermit is standing. This card also suggests a definitive isolationist policy and is reflective of Trump's stated desire to withdraw the United States from all collective trade agreements and return to bilateral trade agreements which would favor U.S. interests. Finally, as a trump card, the hermit who is standing upon his Trump tower is none other than Donald Trump himself, guiding the people under his light. Keep in mind, however, that his guidance is an illusion within this card, as are all things which are performed at the hands of this magician. For in truth, the masses have no means by which they can divert their course and turn to the left or the right, being driven forward by the ever-changing terrain. Therefore, the course of the people, their protests, and all that they do is being keenly manipulated by external forces in such a way as to make it all seem very organic, when in reality it is merely another facet of a programmed architecture that has been years in the making, an architecture programmed and manufactured by the triumvirate of power as discussed under the World card. Card 5. How your current situation can affect your future. This is the Death card, number 13. Okay. This is the part where the nausea sets in again. This card is nothing but absolute horror. Ordinarily, the Death card is a signal of transition from one state to another. In this case, the means of the transition are actually displayed, and the concept of transitioning from one state to another state, as in political state, is clearly evident in context and proximity to the cards adjacent to the Death card, meaning that America may transition from republic to empire as a result of events that unfold, not unlike what happened in ancient Rome under the rule of Julius Caesar, when he was declared emperor of Rome. Now, I know that this sounds super melodramatic, but this literally is the subtext in relation to the positional context in this reading. Looking at the card, we see in the distance there is a red sun. This is a reference to ancient Saturn, or Kronos, proto-Saturn, which is also appropriate as depicted alongside death, Kronos also being the Grim Reaper. This is the dawn of a red sun, meaning that it is yet another indication that we have left the age of Pisces and are now in the age of Aquarius, which is classically ruled by Saturn. As we come closer to the foreground, we see a massive nuclear detonation laying waste to the land in the distance. Clearly, someone is speaking of the start of a significant war. I can only see this as being a proxy war, one fought by the superpowers, the US and Russia, through smaller third world nations, over resources and ultimately currency dominance worldwide. Should we win, and it appears that we will by examining the nature of the American flag draping over the world, the petrodollar will have a currency monopoly over all world economies, bringing us one step closer to absolute world governance. Above the pale rider are what appear to be bees, maybe locusts, in context with the blighted earth beneath. If they are bees, this could be an indication that the continued use of Monsanto pesticides will create further devastation within bee populations worldwide, resulting in famine, as is witnessed by the ground bearing only scrub and weeds. In addition, there is a river that is dried out with a dead fish in the riverbed. This seems to be an indication that we are in for extreme drought in 2017, perhaps an additional cause for the blighted earth, and also additional cause for famine and warfare in the third world due to increasing costs of basic grains and foods. Death is certainly going to be a theme in 2017, but I fear that in this context, it will have as much to do with actual death as it does sociological, ideological, or cultural change. Card 6. Near future, less than 6 months. The Magician, card number 1. In this card, we see the magician, a bright yellow sun at his back, an indication that all he does is supported by the sun or its power, most likely a Luciferian or Illuminati reference. The magician appears to be dressed in his traditional garb, except that he is now wearing VR goggles. The goggles are the first clue that all we are about to see or do is an illusion, but an illusion with a very real consequences. Since all the cards within this reading are trump cards, Trump would be seen to be the magician, and like a magician, Trump will be surrounded with his fantastic assistants. However, as 2017 develops, we will soon discover the real illusion is that his fantastic assistants, and specifically his fantastic assistant, Vice President Mike Pence, is the actual magician and one performing all the magic, leaving the audience, us, to believe that it is Trump, when in reality, Trump is but a puppet held on a very short string by those with very real interest in seeing 2017 develop as planned. Furthermore, it is important to note that this is also one of the 3 cards that is being touched by the Emperor Judgment card in position number 2, meaning that anything done by this card is accomplished or facilitated by the card touching it. So this is where we will see Donald Trump become the new Ronald Reagan. And like Reagan, it will be the vice president who is secretly running the show. In Reagan's case, it was former CIA Director George Herbert Walker Bush, who served as vice president and then later a one-term president, totaling 12 years of control or influence in the White House under George Herbert Walker Bush. This pattern of Republican rule was later repeated during George W. Bush's administration, where former Secretary of Defense under George Herbert Walker Bush, Dick Cheney, was now serving as his vice president. The reason for this form of leadership is clear when you understand Grover Norquist's 2012 CPAC speech, where he stated the following relative to the needs of the Republican Party and the office of the president. Quote, "All we have to do is replace Obama. We're not auditioning for a fearless leader. We don't need a president to tell us what direction to go. We know what direction to go. We want the Ryan budget. We just need a president to sign this stuff. We don't need someone to think it up or design it. The leadership now for the modern conservative movement for the next 20 years will be coming out of the House and the Senate. Pick a Republican with enough working digits to handle a pen and become President of the United States. This is a change for Republicans. The House and Senate doing the work with the President signing bills. His job is to be the captain of the team, to sign the legislation that has already been prepared. And who is the President of the Senate? The Vice President of the United States. Get it? When you vote Republican, you are actually voting in the Vice President more than you are voting in the President, due to the fact that their focus is now upon the legislature. With relation to this card, the tools of the magician appear to be in the form of factory work and housing in particular. This seems to be a solid read on Trump's acceptance speech, wherein he stated that he wanted to improve infrastructure to make America great again. This will have extraordinary economic benefit for industry and corporate America, but whose value or impact will be greatly diminished by the time that it descends to the average American. It will be seen as the new trickle-down economics, but as before, the deregulations and breaks will only further indebt American interests to foreign investing nations. Remember, all of what is being done will be accomplished with vast deficit spending, coupled with massive cuts to social programs or restructuring of these programs in such a way as to make them unrecognizable from their previous state. Card 7. Distant future, greater than 6 months. Wheel of Fortune, card 10. In this card, the occupants of the wheel have been replaced by what appears to be known world leaders or world powers. We see the flags of Germany, Russia, and France as read clockwise around the wheel, and it appears that this is confirmed in the caricatures of the prime ministers of Germany and Russia, but the current prime minister of France is Manuel Valls, and the depiction of the French prime minister in 2017 is clearly a woman. I can only suppose that this is a prediction that power in France will shift and someone like Marine Le Pen, or Le Pen herself, will assume the role of French prime minister. The wheel is operated with a crank, and beneath the leaders are ballot boxes with 2 ballots sticking out, each bearing an X, which is the value of the card itself and perhaps an indication that regardless of who is chosen, it will still be the same old thing in Europe. The 2 X's may also be read together as XX as a reference to what I have termed in other work as the shift, which is our apparent transition from patriarchal XY-dominated politics to a more matriarchal XX system. This is in keeping with our transition into the age of Aquarius, where a more egalitarian system of government is to be expected to be established. Above the Prime Minister of Germany, Angela Merkel, we see a great storm, with a lightning bolt, again reminiscent of the Tower card, striking her in the groin. This is an indication that she will be rendered impotent. In contrast, France is cast in a golden light, with the sun just behind them, and Russia is seen in a kind of foundation, or perhaps their passage through the V gap at the base of the wheel is a kind of passage into a new day, and perhaps Russia's day has yet to come. Whatever happens, the tilt of Judgment Emperor is such that it keeps itself, and by association the United States, clear of the effects of the financial turmoil that will result in Europe over the course of 2017. We'll have our own domestic turmoil to resolve over here. Card 8. Fears. The Star, or card number 17. Ironically, the star is most often associated with hope, and so our hopes and our fears are unified in this card as presented, meaning that what we fear is leading us to the things for which we hope. In the case of this card, what we fear is a ruined earth, political, economic, and social strife, and a fundamental change in our spiritual systems of belief. That for which we hope is a new world. In this case, it would appear to be Mars. There's a lot to say regarding this card. It is dramatically different from its original, there being 15 stars, a reference to Capricorn via the Devil card, and the Maiden, or Hope, typically framed center card is conspicuously absent. Instead of the traditional 7 plus 1, 7 stars are small white, 1 star is large and golden, like our star, the Sun, we have 14 golden stars with the image of children, perhaps child celebrities. It's hard to tell, the image is rather poor, within each of the stars. And 1 star is falling or is commentary. Seen with this card reversed, the commentary body looks much like a Madonna or Virgin Mary image, which I have seen so many times in the Catholic Church. This may be yet another indication that what is seen as traditional Christianity will pass away and either be reborn as something different or replaced entirely. This fallen Madonna stands in stark contrast to the actual card, which depicts a nude maiden healing the earth and the seas under the light of a golden star, giving hope and promise for the future. Here, We see this rebirth or death as associated with the planet Mars due to its red and cratered surface, a rebirth that will likely be tied to a hidden human history which will be revealed as the foundation for a new system of belief. Mars has been placed into public consciousness since the writings of Edgar Rice Burroughs and Princess of Mars, but never so much as it has today. Hell, even South Park is obsessing over Mars in this season of South Park as Cartman tries to get his new girlfriend Heidi to solve NASA's problems so that they can escape the coming apocalypse following the election of Mr. Garrison, aka Trump, as president. Riding upon the tides of prevailing consciousness in popular culture, it is clear that Mars has been placed in the public eye for a very long time for a very big reason. If I didn't know better, I would suggest to you that the foundation of this new system of belief will be presented in one form or another in the following way: that human ancestry transcends the Earth and may be tied to another world, Mars. This may be related to new archaeological findings and perhaps even technologies which will be presented as being a new discovery, but in truth has been known and understood among those in the know for perhaps decades, if not longer. Sounds wild? We shall see. Behind the children in the yellow stars, we have 10 white dots, most likely stars, and here again we see the number 10 referenced against the card numbered 17. It is my instinct that this is a significant date, October 17th, 2017, in the coming year. This may be a date that we find ourselves embroiled in international controversy or intrigue, or perhaps even additional war. Or it may be the day we make contact, or acknowledge that we have been in contact with powers or sources outside of the Earth for some time. Without a doubt, we have certainly been prepared for such an event over the last several decades, not the least of which was seen in the recent movie Arrival. Finally, the tilt of this card separates its influence from the triumvirate of power seen in the World card in position 3. This means that whatever is done to promote hope or movement toward a brighter future will have no impact on the actual forces and architects of this world. The card's impact will be felt within the circles of popular culture and politics, but its presence will be much like that of the Occupy movement, where it is eventually rendered impotent. Card 9. Fate. The Emperor Judgment card, or 620. And here we find ourselves back in the hands of the Emperor, or within the judgment of the Emperor. Our fate and that of Donald Trump are inextricably intertwined from this point forward, and there is precious little we can do about it. From this point forward, America has been put on notice, and our future is grim. Furthermore, our future is out of our hands. Quite literally, we are the person who has stepped off the precipice and is falling, and no amount of action or thought is going to keep us from the consequence of having stepped off the ledge. That being that we are about to hit the ground and hit it hard. There is just a point when there's nothing you can do but buckle up and ride this one out, praying you survive, and this is just one of those readings. Were I to combine this reading with an astrological weather forecast, I would say that we should expect things to become incendiary in mid-October and develop into a full-on conflagration by the winter solstice of 2017, not unlike what is presented in the death card here in this reading. Remember, these are the Trump cards, and by de facto are out of the control of the querent. Like I said, when I began, this layout made me nothing but nauseous, and I'm still feeling sick inside. Whereas 5 years ago, I'd have called you crazy for suggesting that I'd be doing a tarot reading taken from the cover of the Economist magazine. Not in 100 years. This is a serious publication, and to see this message so clearly communicated to those of us who can read it leaves me a little bit dizzy with incomprehension. Why? Oh yeah, now I remember why. It's the big fuck you to America and the world by those in the know who know what's coming and are in fact the very architects of that future. Well, that's my reading. I hope that this has been helpful, if not illuminating. I really wish that this could have been one of those nice podcasts that had to do with more uplifting things, but circumstances are such that I have been pulled back into this 2 times now, and I had to respond. Not doing so, well, that's not how I roll. People need to know. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this has been The Map, the Modern Alchemist podcast. Today we examine the tarot spread as seen in the front cover of the Economist magazine. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And for this one, share. Please share this one. Be safe, be strong, fear not. We will prevail, as we ever have done before, and as we ever shall do tomorrow.